And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we're going to be doing our recap of all the NBA games that went down last night. So we'll start with the important one, and the important one is the Suns were able to beat the Clippers in the next matchup. So they won 124-108. Now, there was no James Harden, no Kawhi Leonard, no Russell Westbrook, and no Paul George in this matchup, which is honestly the only reason why I think the Phoenix Suns were able to win in this game, because there was no perimeter defenders that were good enough to stop Devin Booker or Kevin Durant, and there was not enough scoring coming in to be able to stop either of them as well. So Devin Booker had a much better game tonight with 37 points on 13 of 24 shooting. Bradley Beal also had a good game tonight, 26 points, and Kevin Durant ended the game with 24 points. So the big three, they performed, but at the same time, they performed against a Clippers team that was lacking in a lot of key players. And so the entire bench wasn't basically out in the starting lineup. But however, Bones ended the game with 37 points and 9 assists. So great performance coming in from him. Just wasn't enough for the high-powered offense that the Suns had, because Devin Booker essentially matched his 37 points, effectively canceling it out. And the rest of the starters for the Clippers, they couldn't provide the scoring boost that they needed. Amir Coffey ended the game with 11 points. Mason Plumlee ended the game with 12 points and 12 rebounds. B.J. Tucker ended the game with 10 points. And off the bench, Brandon Boston Jr. ended the game with 23 points and 7 rebounds. And that was essentially all the scoring that happened in this game for this Clippers team. So obviously not having any of their star players affected them dramatically. And the Suns, I don't even want to give the Suns credit for this win, because it's against a team that doesn't even have all of their players. So we could put a little asterisk on that with for the Phoenix Suns. With this win coming in from Phoenix, this effectively locks the Lakers and Golden State in the play-in tournament. So now there's nothing that the Lakers can do to get out of the play-in situation. So they're going to be forced to play at least 2 play-in games, and that's obviously that's not ideal, considering how you're going to play 2 play-in games just to match up against the Denver Nuggets if they continue staying at the 9th seed. Now, if they move up to the 8th seed, then there's a high chance that they won't have to play the Nuggets. They will have to play a team like the Timberwolves or the Thunder, depending on how the standings end. Again, it's the Nuggets still haven't clinched the 1 seed yet. But since we are talking about the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, might as well talk about their matchup from last night. I watched a majority of that game, and the Timberwolves, they were struggling on the offensive side of the ball, and they were really missing Karl-Anthony Towns' production, who is expected to return in the lineup as soon as this weekend. So Timberwolves fans, rejoice for that. But Rudy Gobert ended the game with 13 points and 15 rebounds. Anthony Edwards ended the game with 25 points. Naz Reid ended the game with 13, and Mike Conley ended with 19. However, Jokic ended with 41, 11, and 7. Jamal Murray ended with 20, and Michael Porter Jr. ended with 18. And that was basically all she wrote for this game. Jokic shot 16 of 20 from the field, a highly efficient 41-point game coming in from him, especially with Rudy Gobert being that center on the team and expected to guard him. So, which is another argument as to why Rudy Gobert, or a lot of people don't think Rudy Gobert should be the defensive player of the year because of how often he gets outplayed by Jokic. But a lot of people forget how good Jokic really is. So it's kind of unfair to put that against him, because when Jokic is on the floor, chances are he's going to have a dominant night regardless. even though there are other centers like if it's a Zubac that are able to put a stop to him and all of his offense. But that's a whole different story. But that's somewhat... This game was highly anticipated if you were the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards said that this was a very important game, but Nikola Jokic thought that it wasn't that much of an important game. Obviously, he would think that that's not much of an important game. It's Jokic. And speaking of Victor Wembanyama, they're actually going to match up against each other tomorrow in the next matchup. So if Jokic ends up scoring fewer points, all because of Victor's presence, maybe that'll be enough for a lot of voters to be convinced that Victor is also a defensive player of the year. But again, I don't really think that's going to happen because, again, Rudy Gobert has shown a lot of value for his defense over the years. And it's not like he doesn't deserve the Defensive Player of the Year. It's really not. A lot of people think that he doesn't deserve it and it should be Victor, but he really does, given what he's doing with the Timberwolves. He's literally just copying what he did on the Utah Jazz. You can't. It's not a coincidence. It just can't. It's too good of a coincidence for it to for him to not have an impact, if that makes enough sense. So looking at the rest of the games, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what game I want to cover next. And so the Dallas Mavericks, they ended up beating the Miami Heat 111-92. Jimmy Butler ended the game with only 12 points. Tyler Hero ended with 21. Caleb Martin ended with 14. And Bam Adebayo only ended with 8. So pretty disappointing performance coming in from the Heat. Jimmy Butler took only 8 shots for some reason. I don't understand why he didn't take more shots, but I mean, I know the media is just going to be like, playoff Jimmy. The second he gets in the playoffs and has a couple of good games. Bam Adebayo shot 3 of 13 from the field, so that wasn't really that good either. And Tyler Hero shot 6 of 15 from the field. Again, not really that good. Now, looking at the situation for the Miami Heat, they look like they're going to be in the play-in tournament as of right now. They just dropped down to the 8th seed, and the Sixers, they're creeping up to that 6th seed. It's bound to happen. If the Pacers, if they end up losing a game, it might happen. But the Miami Heat, they look to be in the play-in spot, and it doesn't really seem like they're going to make it out, assuming that all the teams they win what they need to win. But this was a much-needed win for the Miami Heat that they just didn't end up getting. And now on the Mavericks side, Luka Doncic ended the game with 29, 9, and 9. Kyrie Irving ended the game with 25, 4, and 3. And the rest of the starting lineup ended with 12 points, and that was good enough to be able to beat the Miami Heat, who are known for having a relatively good defense. And now, with all of these wins that the Mavericks are getting, and all of these, again, these are really good wins that the Mavericks are getting, and the fact that they're getting these wins, it's bringing the attention to the media that Luka and Kyrie Irving might be the best duo in the NBA right now, aside from Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. I give Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray that nod because they literally just won a championship. So with that in mind, the fact that they're the best duo in the league, it's very, very surprising, especially since it's Kyrie Irving. Kyrie, he's had a lot of issues with the locker room previously, but those issues haven't been brought up once when he's on the Dallas Mavericks. And it's really he's really shown everyone just how valuable of a player he really is and how good he really is, especially when paired up with Luka. So I thought that this duo wouldn't work with the squad that they had and the lack of defense that they had, but they've so far proven me wrong. Now, they look to be matched up against the Clippers in the first round, which might be bad news for this team because this Clippers team, they well, not this Clippers team in particular, but the Clippers, they seem to always beat Luka Doncic in the first round. Like, every single time they seem to beat him. And it doesn't matter how well Luka performs. They just always beat him. And Kawhi almost always shows up in those games. And it's like, is it going to happen again? We'll see. Maybe this will be the year where they finally get over the Clippers. Because the one time that they didn't play the Clippers in the playoffs, they made it relatively far. And they made a really deep run. However, playing the Clippers, they lost in the first round every single time. So it's very interesting matchup, and we'll see how it goes. But next on this on the list of games, the Nets end up beating the Raptors, a relatively unimportant game because, again, these are two bottom-feeding teams, and these teams have already been eliminated from playoff contention, so there was no real need to really talk about this game. Again, both teams were eliminated, so, why would I even bother? But regardless, it's, it's a win. As a Nets fan, it's a win. A win is a win, so, I'll take it, but still, it's couldn't have started winning earlier. But I digress. So the Cavs, they ended up playing the Memphis Grizzlies, and they ended up winning 110-98. They really need to get back onto that winning mindset now that they have Donovan Mitchell, because they've sort of let a couple of games loose. And they play the Pacers tomorrow. So depending on if the Pacers win or if they lose, it could have drastic implications on the playoffs and who they would end up playing. Because right now, the Cavs are the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they could take the 3rd seed if, the Knicks end up losing. And if they do take the 3rd seed, then they'll be matched up against the Sixers if the Sixers win out. There's a lot of scenarios that could still go down, so it's really difficult to sort of pinpoint exactly what's going to happen in this Eastern Conference. And usually I can do that relatively early, but it's so close that I just can't. So Jarrett Allen, he ended the game with 16 and 10. Donovan Mitchell ended the game with 29. Darius Garland ended the game with 16 and 9. And I feel like Darius Garland is really going to have to step up in the playoffs if the Cavs have any chance of making it out. And Evan Mobley ended the game with 12 points and 12 rebounds. And that was basically all the important scoring. Oh, never mind. Karis LeVert ended the game with 18 points coming off the bench. And that was the scoring for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, on the Grizzlies, Jake LaRavia, ended the game with 32 points and played 40 minutes, which is honestly insane. And let's see. Jaren Jackson Jr., no, not Jaren Jackson, Gigi Jackson, forgive me for that, ended the game with 22 points, and Scottie Pippen Jr. ended the game with 18 points. Now, in this Cavs game, something funny relatively happened, and the Cavs broadcast team had no idea who a player was, and his name was Timmy Allen, and he's a rookie in the NBA. He just got drafted last year, and the broadcast team literally had no idea who he was. And I really feel like that's disrespectful, because imagine you're him. Imagine you worked so hard to make it to the NBA, and then the broadcast team just says, "Who is this guy?" That is so disrespectful. And it's how do they not have a list of all the players that are on the roster ready and available for them? How do they not have that? I think that was a very, very bad job by the broadcasting crew. I really wouldn't be surprised if some of them got fired afterwards, because that was an incredibly disrespectful joke. And they literally put question marks around his name, question marks around his stats, when all of that can be found on Google. I genuinely don't understand why they did that. That was incredibly disrespectful. And that was really the biggest story in this game. So, next game on the list is the Charlotte Hornets beating the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the Atlanta Hawks, they got Trae Young back from an injury. He ended the game with 14 points and 11 assists. Doesn't sound like much. However, he only took 5 shots and made all 5 of his shots. also making all of his free throws. So he shot 100% from the field while at the same time getting 11 assists. So while they did end up losing, it wasn't Trae Young's fault. I mean, how can you fault him for not missing a shot and getting 11 assists? You literally just can't. Now, Vit Krejcik ended the game with 19 points. And forgive me if I botched that last name. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Bogdan Bogdanovic ended the game with 19 points. Clint Capella ended with 15. And there was no DeJounte Murray in this game. Now, despite that, the Hornets, they ended up winning 115 to 114. Brandon Miller ended the game with 27 points. And Brandon Miller, he's really fun to watch. Like, he thinks the best player ever is Paul George, and if you really watch him play, you can see, like, a lot of his moves are, like, copied from Paul George, and I really think it's really cool to see, and it's kind of nostalgic. But Trey Mann ended the game with 16 points, 7 steals, and 7 assists, and let's see, who else was scoring? Grant Williams ended the game with 16 points, and that was basically all the scoring that came in from Charlotte. And they were able to get this win. Again, it's not really an important win because they've already been eliminated and the Hawks are already locked in the play-in, so, you know, you take what you can get, I guess. But regardless, moving on, the Bucks ended up beating the Orlando Magic in a blowout win. I seriously do not understand how they just play better with Damian Lillard and without Giannis. I really don't, but it's a weird trend. Bobby Portis ended the game with 30 points and 9 rebounds. Damian Lillard ended the game with 29 points and 9 assists. And Patrick Beverley ended the game with 13. Brook Lopez ended with 10. Jay Crowder ended with 14. And that was essentially like all the important scoring. Bobby Portis shot 14 of 18 from the field. And these guys, they really know how to win when Damian Lillard's on the court. But it's just when they put Giannis and Dame together, they can't. And I don't understand why. Because on paper, it should work. Now, the Magic, they've been on a little bit of a slump with these games. Like Cole Anthony, he ended the game with 23 points. Paolo Banchero ended the game with only 20 points. And Jalen Suggs ended the game with 18 points. And the rest of the players shot pretty poorly for the Orlando Magic. So, you know, a lot of difficulties there for the Magic. And not a good time, too. Especially since, like, you know, the Bucks don't have Giannis. And they're expected to play in the playoffs. And here they are losing. Last game on this list is the Spurs going up against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, the Thunder, they ended up winning, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ended the game with 26 points. Chet ended the game with 9. Jalen Williams ended the game with 10. And that was essentially all of the scoring that came in, like all the big scoring that came in from OKC. This was much more of a team win than anything else, as everybody on the box scores ended up scoring at least 1 point, except for 2 other people. Now, on the Spurs, since they did not have Victor Wembanyama in this game, obviously they weren't going to win by that much. And not really much that needs to be said because it's a bottom-feeding team going up against a top team in the Western Conference. So, with that, that's the end of the recap, and we are out of time for this third segment. So now I will go into the fourth segment, where I'm going to probably go on a little bit of a rant about Ben Simmons because of the Nets' intentions with him. So I will be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.